Crossovers are ever more crucial for the mainstream makers, and this one, the CHR, is particularly important for Toyota, hence the package of improvements made to this lightly facelifted version. A little extreme, isn't it? But then it's supposed to be, aimed at Qashqai class buyers who want to make something of a statement. This car certainly does that. What comes to mind when you think of a Toyota? We're guessing that it probably isn't anything quite like this. This CHR crossover takes your preconceptions about the brand and then stamps all over them. Back in 1994, another similarly sized and targeted Toyota also did exactly that. The original RAV4, as dramatic a departure for the brand in its time as this CHR, or Coupe High Rider model, is today. Back then, the innovation didn't last, and the RAV4 became boring and middle-aged at a time when it could have become the kind of fashionable Qashqai class crossover that buyers would have loved. It could have become, well, something exactly like this. Since its launch in late 2016, the CHR has been something of a success story for Toyota, finding over 400,000 buyers across Europe, 50,000 of those in Britain. By 2019, it was in fact accounting for nearly 40% of the UK's entire alternatively fuelled vehicle market, basically the segment covering full hybrids, plug-ins and full EVs. As both a crossover and a full hybrid, this car fitted in precisely with two growing trends: the move from conventional super minis and family hatches to compact SUVs, and the growing sense amongst consumers that they should be buying a car featuring some level of engine electrification. Plus, buyers liked the trendy looks and the surprisingly sharp handling. But the competition has been catching up. In 2019, the launch of Hyundai's Kona Hybrid delivered the CHR its first really direct segment competitor, and that Korean model could significantly undercut this Toyota on price. Plus, other trendy SUV B-segment models have sprung up, offering other different routes towards powertrain electrification. Mild hybrid tech for the Ford Puma, a plug-in powertrain for the Renault Captur, and a full EV battery pack for Peugeot's E2008. Hence the need for the package of CHR updates that Toyota announced for this car at the end of 2019. Now, the key change here lies beneath the bonnet. Since with the original model, 8 out of every 10 drivers wanted a hybrid, the conventional 1.2-litre petrol unit previously offered with this car was dropped as part of the updates, and the petrol-electric part of the range broadened with the addition of the more powerful 2-litre full hybrid engine that we're going to test here to sell alongside the existing 1.8-litre hybrid power plant. This quicker version gets some suspension enhancements, and across the range there are also a few light updates to the exterior styling and the cabin, plus refinements further improved, and Apple CarPlay, Android Auto smartphone mirroring at last makes an appearance. Will it all be enough to keep this Toyota current and justify what these days is a pretty premium price tag by SUV B segment or C segment standards? Let's find out. Back in 2017, when we first tested this car, the CHR was a bit of a revelation. Compact Toyotas back then were pretty much all as dull as ditch water, and we didn't expect that this compact crossover model's addition of weight and height to the recipe would improve things. In the event, though, we were pleasantly surprised. This car, it turned out, had been developed by enthusiastic drivers, and its construction on a brand new, stiff, sophisticated GAC platform meant it could certainly handle more performance than the volume 1.8-litre hybrid power plant was able to give. Noticing that, quite a few owners asked Toyota if a gutsier engine option could be provided, and the brand has duly obliged as part of this model's facelift update, building into the range the option of the 182 brake horsepower 2-litre hybrid powertrain we first saw in the Corolla. Most CHR buyers will continue to stay with the 1.8, but it's the 2-litre hybrid unit that we're trying here. When this CHR was originally developed, the chief engineer on the project was part-time race driver Hiroyuki Koiba, one of the senior development executives freed up by Toyota president Akio Toyoda to push the envelope a bit when it comes to what people can expect from the brand. Back in this century's first decade, Koiba would have been straitjacketed into creating the kind of anonymous, forgettable driving experience that's common to most compact crossover models. With this CHR, though, things were different. Koiba-san dismayed the Tokyo bean counters by insisting on a motorsport-inspired, independent double wishbone suspension arrangement and bespoke European-made Sachs dampers, then decided he'd also throw in a new intelligent manual transmission system able to blip the throttle Formula One style on quick downshifts. Getting the idea yet? In terms of feel as well as fashion, this is anything but your average Qashqai class crossover. Koiba-san also spent many months with a team that pounded development CHR models around European roads, a program that included several stints in Britain and a race with a prototype model at the Nürburgring. That experience reminded him that people on this continent drive faster than on others and are less inclined to slow down for roundabouts and corners, hence a greater need for what he describes as response linearity and consistency. That means a vehicle able to react immediately to driver input, but in a gradual, progressive way that's always predictable, no matter what the speed or circumstances. All of which sounds good, but in this case must have been fiendishly difficult to deliver. For a start, the model in question here is a high-riding crossover, the kind of car that would normally react to enthusiastic cornering with the kind of demeanour you get from a ship in a storm. On top of that, Koiba-san and his team were told that this CHR must be based on the vanilla underpinnings of Toyota's worthy but underwhelming Prius hatch, hardly the kind of starting point you'd want to choose for any kind of sporting car. And that the prime engine had to be that Prius's 1.8-litre petrol-electric hybrid unit, a power plant necessarily saddled with a jerky, belt-driven CVT auto transmission reputed to be anything but linear in its responses. A lesser engineer might have thrown in the towel at this point, but Koiba-san and his team set to work with a will. The Prius-derived GAC platform, they noted, was impressively stiff and allowed for a particularly low centre of gravity to offset the CHR's required high-riding stance. Once they'd shortened this chassis by 40mm, then given it a wider track and added in a chunky set of anti-roll bars, things were starting to look up. The Mark IV model Prius's completely redesigned electric power steering system also came to their aid, and further tweaking of the setup produced an actually quite sophisticated meeting of weight and directness, able to give the CHR driver the kind of instinctive feeling of command at the wheel that Hiroyuki and his team were looking for. Which is something you appreciate the first time you try one of these. Yes, the enthusiast in us still seeks a little more driver feedback than the helm is capable of delivering, but the vast majority of likely buyers of this car will, we think, be very satisfied with it, and of course the inherent lightness of the setup is terrific to have in town. As for the ride, well, Koiba-san apparently had a last-minute change of heart here. Having originally set it up to be firm and sporty, at the very last minute he changed the settings to allow the car to breathe a little more over the bumps. Thank goodness he did. The result, a car that, though quite softly sprung, can still attack a turn with enthusiasm, is one that some other brands could do well to learn from. The engine and transmission issues were more difficult to deal with. Arguably the biggest problem lies in that CVT auto gearbox with its arbitrarily placed virtual gear ratios. Even when accelerating quite gently, this belt-driven transmission sends the revs soaring without much accompaniment in terms of rapid forward motion. Push your right foot down harder, and much the same sort of thing happens, though with the added bonus of a straining engine note. Initially, this can be frustrating until you realise that a different driving style is required here. You don't make a hybrid engine go quickly by ramming your right foot to the floor, but by backing off the throttle in between the ratios in a way that lets the revs drop and the engine bite into its torque curve. Once you understand this, things improve and get better still once you realise that the initially rather dead feel you get when pushing on the accelerator can be slightly mitigated by fiddling with mode buttons on the steering wheel that include a sport setting as well as the ordinary, normal and eco options. These tweak steering and gear change response as well as throttle feel. And with Sport activated, the CHR gathers itself together with slightly more enthusiasm, the extent of which will depend on which of the hybrid engine options you've chosen. The petrol power plant in question for most buyers of this car will be the 1.8 litre unit that virtually all pre-facelift CHR models were sold with. In this facelifted model, this engine replaces its previous nickel metal hydride battery with a smaller, lighter lithium-ion one and works with the 53 kilowatt 600 volt electric motor to generate a combined system output of 122 brake horsepower. That's all right, but this power plant's very modest 142 Newton-metre torque output is about 40% down from what you get from a typical 1.5 or 1.6 litre conventional small diesel, something you'll really notice in normal give-and-take motoring. Overtakes sometimes have to be planned quite a way in advance. You won't really appreciate the reality of that merely by perusing the rest of 62 mph sprint stat rated at 11 seconds. But the 1.8 litre hybrid engine's limitations are perhaps more evident from the feeble 105 mph top speed. All of which is why, before signing on the dotted line for a CHR, we think you should at least try the 2 litre hybrid powertrain that we're testing here. Toyota says this larger capacity unit provides a more energised drive, as you'd hope it would, given that power output rises to 192 brake horsepower. For us, this engine is a much more complete proposition, partly because of its extra grunt, but mainly because the link between accelerator position, revs and actual performance is far better matched. Here, Toyota's efforts to suppress engine response to sharp throttle inputs and create a more linear response by putting the initial burden on the powerful electric motor have borne more fruit. The single-speed transaxle matches engine speed with acceleration more convincingly, and you no longer have to spend so much time with the accelerator rammed against its bump stops when you're running late for wherever it is that you've got to be. For reference, the rest of 60 mph time of this 2 litre model is rated at 8.2 seconds and the top speed is 112 miles an hour. But more relevant is the huge improvement in response in the 30 to 50 mile an hour overtaking increment that makes the car feel so much more flexible and spontaneously powerful on faster roads. Now, don't misunderstand us, a 2 litre hybrid CHR is still way down on the level of pulling power a black pump-fueled engine would produce, with a 190 Newton-metre torque figure that's almost 50% less than a comparable 2 litre diesel. But you notice the shortfall much less than you do with the 1.8 litre hybrid variant, though you still have to compensate for it, and the CVT transmission's occasional uncertainty remains sometimes annoying. If Toyota were to use a dual-clutch auto gearbox with proper cogs, rather than this CVT setup's rubber belt, as part of its hybrid powertrain, as, for example, Hyundai's rival Kona hybrid model does, we can't help thinking that this issue would be far better resolved. When choosing between engines with this car, you might also want to be aware that Toyota's engineers restricted the improvements made to the suspension and refinement of this facelifted model to the 2 litre hybrid variant. Suspension changes include new shock absorbers, while efforts to improve driving din, which was pretty restrained anyway, were centred around carefully placed seals, noise reduction and absorption pads in 11 different locations around the interior. What else? Well, we should cover what you can't now have in this car. The conventional 1.2 litre petrol turbo engine that used to be available in this model has now been deleted for our market, and that in turn means that you can no longer have either a manual gearbox or all-wheel drive in a CHR purchased here. Not that it would ever have been wise to take this Toyota far off a paved surface anyway. It's simply not built for that, and the towing capability, rated at just 725 kilograms, is also pretty pathetic. The CHR's remit is, of course, for the urban jungle rather than the Amazon, and it's in such a city environment that you might be tempted to use the provided EV button that's supposed to deliver a degree of all-electric motoring. Unfortunately, there's not much point in doing so because the battery runs out of puff in a few hundred yards and won't function at all if the engine's cold or if for some reason the cells haven't been charged up. If that's a problem for you, then you'll need to find a bit more for one of the PHEV plug-in models now starting to appear in this market segment. That kind of technology will probably make an appearance on the next generation of CHR. But on the evidence of this test, this one still seems to have a great deal of life left in it. Customer feedback has improved what was already a very complete product. Just look at it. Can this really be a model made by Toyota, a brand once so notable for forgettably styled family hatchbacks? This, apparently, is what happens when the shackles are removed from the company's designers, as President Akio Toyoda assures us they will be going forward. Initially revealed as a concept car at the Paris Motor Show in 2014, the CHR's futuristic styling made it through to production reality remarkably unscathed. According to the Japanese maker, it's for young customers driven by emotional considerations. A crossover for someone who wants their car to serve as an extension of their personality. If you can't see the point of that, then move right along. You won't like what's on offer here. These days, this is a car we're now a little bit more familiar with, but see a CHR for the first time, and it's difficult to know what to look at first, with prominently projecting wheel arches, hidden rear door handles, and a floating roof headlining the design flourishes. If you are minded to be boring and cynical about Toyota's efforts, you won't get much sympathy from us. This market segment is so crammed with alternatives that anything new simply has to stand out, and this car absolutely does. Now, if you accept that the finished product is part coupe, part hatchback and part crossover, then without doubt it's the SUV element that's most obvious here at the front. The high bonnet framing a slender upper grille and headlights smeared at each corner. Beneath that is a large expanse of upper bumper, below which lie twin air intakes. The upper one, a thin slit, and the lower, a much bigger opening for the radiator. In terms of what's visually different about this updated model, this area of the front is probably where the biggest updates lie, with changes made to the panel between the air intakes and the relocation of the fog lamps into these slanted aero-style corner cutouts. Other changes see the daytime running light strips, which integrate the indicators, move from the lower to the upper part of the headlamp units. Across the range, the headlights now feature LED reflector beams. Not much has changed in profile, not much needed to. From this perspective, the coupe cues become more obvious, with an evident sense of movement, even at a standstill, thanks to this dramatic upward lower crease that rises sharply into the power-packed rear haunches. The aesthetic form here would be spoiled by a rear door handle, so the catch has been positioned up here in the roofline, another touch guaranteed to annoy the Surbiton set. We mentioned the prominent wheel arches, separated by this curving blacked out lower rocker panel. They give the car its high riding stance, and frame freshly restyled alloy rims that are 17 inches with base icon trim, but as in this case 18 inches in size further up the range. A few subtle changes feature at the rear. These ribbed rear light clusters gain super bright LED tech, a more expressive illumination signature and progressive scrolling indicators. They continue to stand proud of the tapering bodywork, but are now connected by this sleek glossy spoiler. Initially though, your eye is more readily drawn to this more prominent vented roof-mounted wing further up, which appears to peel off the back of the car. Sculpted lower reflectors at each corner tease the eye into believing this Toyota to be wider than it really is. And, as is now common in the crossover class, the bottom part of the bumper is shaped to look like a diffuser and incorporates a central fog lamp. Of course, as usual, what's more important is the stuff you can't see, notably the light, stiff, Prius-based GAC platform that gives the car such a low centre of gravity. And behind the wheel? Well, it would have been such a disappointment if all that exterior innovation had been matched with dull, derivative interior design. Thankfully, as you can see, that's not the case. Instead, we've got diamond-themed door cards, stereo speakers shaped like ninja weapons, an eye-catching Deco Lion trim strip that runs from side to side of the cabin, and an intricately layered fascia topped off by an asymmetrically shaped infotainment screen that's ferociously unconventional and looks like it's crash-landed in the middle of the dash. What wasn't quite as evident with the original version of this car was the quality feel that buyers at the upper end of the volume brand mid-sized SUV segment are now increasingly looking for. So, for this updated model, Toyota's design team spent some time improving the visual and tactile quality of all the interior surfaces and switchgear to try and create a more premium environment. We hear this kind of claim a lot with facelifted models, but here there's some substance to it. The inlays now have a more refined finish, the door panels are soft touch in all contact areas, and there's a charismatic diamond theme evident in the door trim panel, the headliner, and even the needles of the analog instrument dials. There was, of course, only so much that could be done, and Toyota's designers couldn't go too far in terms of enhancing quality for fear of trespassing on the territory of their corporation's identically engineered premium brand model in this segment, the Lexus UX. As a result, you still wouldn't think you were in a Mercedes, a BMW or an Audi, thanks also in part to the right old mixture of materials used here. There are certainly plenty of them, nappa-grained soft-touch plastic juxtaposed with piano black lacquers, satin chrome, and some remarkably effective fake stitched faux leather. The men in polo necks have really gone to town. Go for a variant with seats featuring black leather upholstery trimming, and the upmarket theme continues with close examination of these chairs, revealing that even here the sports SUV theme has been taken to heart. The thickly padded bases that you'd expect from an SUV combine with an upper section that narrows towards your shoulder blades, just as a sports car's pews might. The elegantly simple leather-stitched sports steering wheel's nice too, with multifunction buttons that enable you to control the various driving modes, as well as the infotainment system. Through these spokes, you view two deeply cowled dials, the one on the right being the circular speedo that you'd expect to see. The left-hand gauge is a power meter that lets you know how much of the engine's energy you're using and when the battery is being recharged as the car slows down. In between these clocks is a 4.2-inch colour screen for the onboard computer, and you can use the steering wheel controls to scroll through its various menus. As well as the usual options of audio and safety settings, there's a compass and a car section that gives you an energy monitor, a digital speedo, and even a G-forces meter. Anything this display can't tell you will probably be dealt with by the prominent 8-inch Toyota 2 media screen that we mentioned earlier, that's angled towards the driver, which is nice, but easily attracts fingerprints and reflections, which obviously isn't. With top dynamic trim, the Deco Lion that we mentioned earlier frames this monitor in vibrant blue as it snakes over the top of the screen on its way across the dash. With this mid-range Excel variant, this colour strip has a more restrained silver finish. Anyway, the Toyota Touch 2 setup has been usefully enhanced as part of the facelift updates, with a set of buttons and dials in the surrounding frame that makes its functions easier to access on the move. and at last by the addition of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto's smartphone mirroring. Avoid entry-level trim, and the screen will include navigation, which, thanks to the use of an updated media platform, now benefits from over-the-air updates so that owners will have access to the latest version of navigation mapping without having to visit a dealership or download updates using intermediate devices. All that's required for an update is an internet connection via a smartphone or the onboard internet module. You also get onboard connectivity via Toyota Online. This gives you access to features like Google Street View, Google Local Search, the TomTom Traffic Service IP traffic, and the Panoramio photo sharing service. The tech-savvy target audience here will also appreciate the possibility of being able to download various apps, everything from internet radio to social media sites. Plus, there's the option of adding in an improved and potentially quite deafening, bespoke developed 8-channel JBL premium audio system upgrade. As for cabin practicalities, well, the ergonomics of the whole layout are difficult to fault. That centre screen positioned nicely in your line of sight, and the vents and air conditioning controls below it also placed high up, right where you need them. Not so good is rearward visibility, something Toyota's clearly well aware of, hence the included rear parking camera and the standardisation of rear parking sensors above entry-level trim. Ultimately, thanks to these tools, it's an issue you can learn to live with. The stylised rear C-pillars and those tiny rear side windows are always going to cause problems here. The testers at What Car make the incisive point that a boxy Seat Ateca is easier to see out of. Surely not. At least cabin stowage space hasn't been compromised in favour of fashion. The front door bins are large and will easily take half-litre bottles, plus there's a reasonably big glove box and a deep lidded storage area between the seats with a 12-volt port. Plus there's a trinket tray ahead of the gear lever that's clearly intended for smartphone storage, given the useful placement of a USB port nearby. Perhaps our favourite practicality touch lies with this teardrop-shaped cup holder which sits behind the gear lever. You can use the trinket tray ahead of the gear lever as a cup holder too. Both are deep, beautifully illuminated and carefully shaped so that they could take a travel mug with a handle. Time to take a seat in the rear, which is where you fear that the whole CHR experience might start to unravel. After all, the prospects don't look especially promising. The swept-back roofline appears certain to cramp the style of taller folk, and this C-pillar looks so wide that an adult could retreat behind it in claustrophobic privacy. Actually, though, things aren't quite as bad back here as you fear there might be. Once you've located the door handle, right up here in the roofline, there's plenty of space for easy entry, which makes it easier to avoid catching your head on the top of the door frame as you get in. And once inside, well, it is what it is. Others have pointed out that the small, high rear side windows that are necessitated by the rising beltline create a slightly claustrophobic feel that might be a recipe for car sickness amongst the very young, which could well be true. Nor, of course, can you expect the kind of headroom that you get in a boxy arrival. Ultimately, given the limitations of the stylised shape, we reckon the designers have done pretty well here, though it's true that the cabin space back here is generally more akin to that you get in a crossover with smaller outward dimensions. Having said that, the legroom on offer really isn't very much different to that of, say, a Qashqai, and headspace is okay, provided you're under 6 foot in height. Plus, if necessary, thanks to the flat seat base and the relatively low central transmission tunnel, you could, if necessary, fit a third person back here, provided the journey in question wasn't too long. It'll certainly all be a revelation to anyone who comes to this car from a cramped little Nissan Juke. Isofix child seat mounts are provided for the 2 outer seats, and a cup holder is moulded into each door to make up for the lack of door pockets. Plus there are mat pockets in the seat backs for extra storage. Finally, let's take a look at the boot. Here again, the swept back rear styling might lead you to worry when it comes to issues of sense and sensibility. Let's see. lift the tailgate. There's still no powered option, and there's quite a high loading lip. But once you get beyond it, there's a reasonably shaped, if rather shallow, space. 377 litres in size. For reference, that's 16 litres more than is offered by this car's most direct competitor, the Hyundai Kona Hybrid. Overall, this is more the kind of capacity that you'd expect from a more compact class of crossover model. Well, actually, it's a bit smaller even than that. A little Nissan Juke has a boot 45 litres larger. You get a couple of large suitcases in this CHR, but that'd be about it. Ultimately, what's provided here is about 20% less room than you'd get from a more typical Qashqai class rival, which isn't great, but it's something that we think the majority of potential owners will be able to live with. Unfortunately, Toyota doesn't offer an adjustable height boot floor, so there's no way of lowering the cargo base to get taller items in. 4 silver tie-down points are provided, and there's a bag hook on each cargo sidewall. 3 storage areas of varying sizes are provided beneath the boot floor, but there's no space for any kind of spare wheel, even one of the space-saver variety. There are no cargo wall side catches to lower the split-folding rear bench, so you have to reach to these catches on the seat's shoulders. When you push them forward, 920 litres of space is revealed up to tonneau cover level, or 1,160 litres if you load up to the roof. When first we tested this car back in 2017, prices started at around £21,000. But by the time of the launch of this facelifted version, that starting figure had risen to around £26,000. And it's quite likely that many buyers will be choosing a model pitched closer to the £30,000 mark. As before, there's this single 5-door body style, and the core engine is a 1.8 litre self-charging hybrid petrol unit with 122 brake horsepower. What's changed, though, is that the conventional 1.2 litre petrol unit that used to be available is no longer offered in our market. And Toyota has added in a 2 litre hybrid petrol power plant with 182 brake horsepower at the top of the range, which is what we've been trying here. Those are the model headlines. Time for some detail on the range structure. Trim levels start with a base 1.8 litre Icon spec variant. Then there's quite a big £2,200 price jump into the main part of the range, which starts with the design versions that most customers choose. At the top of the lineup, you've 2 trim choices which both cost around the same. Excel, which is what we have here, and emphasises luxury, and Dynamic, which prioritises sportiness. Design, Excel and Dynamic variants all offer the option of the 2 litre hybrid engine for a premium of around £1,600 over the alternative 1.8 litre unit. And whatever CHR model you choose, you have to have front-wheel drive and CVT auto transmission. Got all that? Good. So, how does the value proposition stack up here? It'll be interesting to see. Back in 2017, some of Toyota's more optimistic marketing people reckon that this car had no direct opposition at all. Well, if that was true then, it certainly isn't now. For a start, much of the same engineering on offer here can be had in a product made by Toyota's luxury car division, the Lexus UX 250h, which uses a 150 horsepower version of the 2 litre hybrid engine and costs around the same as a 2 litre CHR. As for other brands, well, at the original launch of this Toyota back in 2017, the only other self-charging hybrid compact SUV in this CHR segment was the rather frumpy-looking Kia Niro, which is still offered, priced from around £25,000. Now, though, there's much tougher competition in the shape of the Hyundai Kona Hybrid, which shares the Niro's 1.6 litre 141 PS hybrid engine, but is cheaper still, priced from around £23,000, a figure that undercuts a base version of this CHR by around £3,000. No small sum. Beyond that, you'd need to be looking at something a bit different beneath the bonnet if you were scouting out competition to this car. Ford's Puma claims to offer a hybrid option in this class, but that car's engine is of the mild hybrid variety, which means it can never run solely on electric power, which in turn means that its efficiency figures are nowhere near those of this Toyota. To compensate though, a Puma is quite a bit cheaper. Prices start from around £21,000. For a little more, you'll also find mild hybrid engine technology these days in the Kia Sportage and the Hyundai Tucson, but again, the same caveats apply. More hybrid references can be found applied to Renault's offering in the compact SUV segment, the Captur, but this E-Tech badged crossover is a plug-in hybrid and therefore comes with quite a premium price tag for a car of its size and build quality. Mini also offers a pricey plug-in hybrid option in this class with its Countryman PHEV. In both cases, you're looking at a slightly different technology approach, but one that could be quite relevant for quite a few buyers. After all, if you're looking at a really pricey CHR variant like this one, it's worth knowing that much the same kind of money could get you a plug-in Renault Captur E-Tech or Mini Countryman PHEV, models with technology that offers the added convenience of a 30-mile electric-only driving range. At the time of this test in mid-2020, other competitors beyond the ones we've already mentioned were all of the non-electrified variety, so conventional petrol and diesel engine crossovers from either the compact super mini base segment, that's products like the Renault Captur and the Nissan Juke, or more likely, given this CHR's pricing, the mid-sized family hatch-based SUV sector. That means products like Nissan's Qashqai and Seat's Attica. Collectively, there are so many different crossover models now on offer across both these categories that it would take more time than we have here to cover them all. And in any case, a key part of the reason that most buyers of this CHR choose it is that they want a self-charging hybrid engine, which, as we've just said, most of these other more conventional compact SUV models can't offer. If, having considered all of these options, you decide that it is this Toyota that you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous the brand has been with the standard spec. Well, let's look at that. As we mentioned earlier, the range kicks off with Icon trim, which gets you 17-inch alloy wheels, LED reflector headlamps with LED daytime running lights, auto headlamps, front fog lamps, and an alarm immobiliser. On the inside, there's dual-zone air conditioning, a 3-spoke leather multifunction steering wheel, and an improved 8-inch Toyota Touch 2 multimedia centre dash display that incorporates a reversing camera, lets you connect in your smartphone via Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and provides access to a 6-speaker DAB stereo system. Plus, you get a wide range of camera safety features, which we'll come on to in a few minutes. Beyond Icon spec, as we touched on earlier, there's quite a big price jump to the next step up in the range. Design trim. Still, you get quite a lot more kit in return, including larger 18-inch alloy wheels, rear privacy glass, power folding door mirrors, rain sensing wipers, and a smart entry and push-button start keyless entry system. Inside, there's heated front upholstery, an electrochromatic rearview mirror, and powered lumbar support for the driver's seat. And the infotainment setup is upgraded to Toyota Touch 2 with Go, which means that you also get a navigation system. From the design level up in this CHR range, you'll additionally find front and rear parking sensors fitted as standard, along with a clever intelligent clearance sonar feature that can detect the risk of a low-speed collision during a parking manoeuvre, say something you haven't seen, like a low wall. Because the intelligent clearance sonar is directly connected to the braking system, if something like that is detected, the brakes will automatically be applied to prevent an incident. And talking of parking, design spec also includes the brand's simple intelligent parking assist system that can identify spaces and line up your CHR for easy manoeuvring into them. At the top of the range, you've got the choice that we mentioned earlier of either XL spec, which is what we have in this case, or a slightly sportier looking dynamic spec model. Now, both base their trimming on what you get with a design model, then add a few nice to have extras. XL spec gives you black leather upholstery, a power adjustable driver's seat, a heated steering wheel and a humidifying nano filter for the climate control system. Dynamic spec, in contrast, offers metallic paint and a bitone paint finish that gives you a contrasting black roof. In the cabin of a dynamic variant, you'll find black and blue fabric on the seats and a dark violet upper dashboard finish featuring a vibrant anodized blue deco line. Both XL and dynamic models give you LED front fog lamps and automatic levelling for adaptive full LED headlamps with beams that turn with the bends. Plus, with both these two top trim levels, there's the contents of a tech pack that'd be optional further down the range, including puddle lights for the door mirrors and some extra camera safety features that we'll tell you about in a moment. But before we get to that, let's talk about options and look at those in greater detail. Nearly all CHR buyers pay extra for metallic paint. We've got Dakuma Grey here. Plus, there are some pearlescent options too. You can add a matte black finish for the 18-inch alloy wheels. And there's an optional Sport Plus pack, which gives you front and rear underguards and side skirts. A chrome pack adds chrome finishing for the side sills, the front fog lamp surrounds, and the rear boot garnish. And you can add black side steps too, if you really must. In terms of luxury stuff, the option Toyota really wants you to consider is the concert hall quality premium audio system that it's developed for XL and dynamic versions of this car with specialist JBL. This 8-channel 576-watt 9-speaker setup supports Clarify technology, which restores digitized sound to almost CD quality. On design and dynamic spec models, you can also option in black leather upholstery. With the entry-level Icon spec variant, given this Toyota's slightly restricted rearward visibility, you're almost certainly going to need to pay extra for the optional parking pack, which gives you front and rear parking sensors, along with that intelligent clearance sonar that we mentioned earlier. On to practical touches. An essential protection pack gives you a boot liner and a rear bumper protection plate. Or you can get both these features as part of a Protection Plus pack that also includes rubber floor mats and scuff plates for the doors. Roof crossbars can be added, and with those you can have a roof box or a ski holder. Plus, of course, you can specify a tow bar. Enough on options. What are the safety standards of this CHR? Well, they're very high, thanks to Toyota's decision to include its Safety Sense package at no extra cost right across the range. This includes 5 key radar-driven features, the most important of which is the pre-collision system with pedestrian detection, autonomous braking setup. Here, a front-mounted camera and a millimetre wave radar sensor both scan the road ahead at between 16 miles an hour and the vehicle top speed, searching for potential collision hazards, either with people or animals, solid objects or other vehicles. If something that you might be in danger of hitting is detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond or aren't able to, then the brakes will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. There are 4 other safety sense features. Lane departure alert lets you know if the car is wandering over road markings. Road sign assist pictures road signs as you pass and displays them on the dash. Automatic high beam dips your headlights for you at night to avoid dazzling oncoming vehicles. And adaptive cruise control automatically regulates your speed on the highway to maintain a safe gap to the car in front, varying as necessary to suit speed and congestion. The CHR also gets plenty of more conventional safety kit too. Twin front, side and curtain airbags, for example, plus a further airbag for the driver's knees and Isofix child seat mounts on the 2 outer rear seats. On top of that, there's hill start assist control to prevent the car from rolling backwards as you pull away on steep inclines, plus VSC stability control and the usual ABS braking and traction control systems. Every model in the range also comes with a tyre pressure warning system and trailer sway control to prevent snaking when towing. Go for top XL or dynamic trim, and more standard safety gear is provided in the form of 2 further radar-driven features. rear cross traffic alert can detect approaching vehicles and warn you as you reverse out of a bay, while the blind spot monitor works on the move to stop you from dangerously pulling out to overtake when there's a vehicle in your blind spot. These two features can be added at extra cost to the base Icon model as part of the optional tech pack that we mentioned earlier. This car may be trendy and fashion-led, but it still has to balance the books. Toyota has stuck to its principles here by not offering a diesel engine, instead persisting with the petrol-electric hybrid technology that's proved to be a major selling point for this model. You can see why from a glance at the WLTP-rated figures. With its standard CVT auto transmission, the volume 1.8 litre hybrid version in base Icon form delivers up to 58.5 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 109 grams per kilometre of CO2, or up to 57.6 miles to the gallon and 110 grams per kilometre if you choose a more common model with the larger 18-inch alloy wheels. Now, it's true that these returns are quite a way off the figures you'd get from the Mark IV Prius model this CHR is based on. That car manages up to 68.3 miles to the gallon and 94 grams per kilometre. And of course, they can't match the showing you'd get from plug-in hybrid crossover versions of direct crossover rivals, like Kia's Niro and the Mini Countryman. What's significant, though, is that the CHR's returns are easily enough to better the readings you get from a rival diesel crossover of the same size and configuration. A comparably priced Volkswagen T-Roc 1.6 TDI, for example, typifies the kind of returns you'd get from a black pump competitor, managing up to 53.5 miles to the gallon, which is somewhere close to a CHR, and 138 grams per kilometre of CO2, which is way off. And those figures are based on a version of that Volkswagen with a manual gearbox rather than the convenience of this Toyota's automatic. The result of all this is that a hybrid CHR attracts a very low benefit-in-kind taxation rating by class standards, between 24 and 25%. To give you some perspective, that rival T-Roc 1.6 TDI is rated at 34%. Plus, of course, a car like that T-Roc will cost more to VED tax while running on pricier fuel. Now, you'll also want to know about the readings of the alternative engine in the CHR lineup, the 182 brake horsepower 2-litre hybrid unit that we're trying here. For that, you're looking at a WLTP-rated combined consumption span of up to 53.5 miles to the gallon and a WLTP CO2 reading of 119 grams per kilometre. That translates into a BIK tax rating of 26%. Again, we'll give you some class perspective on that. To give you another diesel comparison, a Volkswagen T-Roc 2-litre TDI DSG diesel model manages 50.4 miles to the gallon, 146 grams per kilometre and 36%. In case you're wondering, a comparable T-Roc 1.5 TSI DSG 150 PS petrol variant manages 42.8 miles to the gallon, 150 grams per kilometre and 32%. And those kinds of returns are pretty typical for conventional diesel and petrol compact crossover models in this class. So, as you can see, this CHR's hybrid technology makes quite a difference. Those in a frugal frame of mind will want to try and get as close as possible to replicating the official figures by using the instrument binnacle's power meter and, as often as possible, staying in its charge and eco zones. Toyota, rather ambitiously, reckons that its self-charging hybrid engines are capable of covering up to 50% of a typical daily commuting drive under electric power alone. You can gauge for yourself how much of your journey has been conducted under full electric propulsion by consulting a dedicated readout in the instrument binnacle. As usual on a Toyota hybrid, there's an available EV button that's supposed to fix the car in electrified motion, which on the 2-litre hybrid can apparently take place at up to 70 miles an hour. In reality, though, you'll find that the batteries are hardly ever charged up enough for you to be able to use this feature. And even when you can, it'll only last for just over a mile. The 2-litre setup might do better than the 1.8 because it has more battery cells and can offer more regenerative energy. The hybrid battery used by the 1.8 litre engine, by the way, now uses lithium-ion cells, which can absorb more current and improve the delivery of electric power. For reasons Toyota couldn't fully explain to us, the 2-litre hybrid powertrain sticks with the old-fashioned nickel-metal hydride battery cells. Either way, during much of your urban motoring in a CHR hybrid, say when you're inching along in traffic with the engine seamlessly disabled, the EV mode activated and battery power in motion, you won't be emitting any emissions. At which point you might like to monitor the hybrid system's cleverness on the energy display that you'll find on the centre console monitor. The same display also providing graphical trip information and history screens so that you can gauge your ongoing success in fuel economy and brake energy regeneration. At higher speeds, you'll need to bear in mind that the quoted fuel figures are even more heavily dependent than normal on the driver assuming a significant degree of restraint. Certainly to get anywhere near even the 40 mile per gallon mark in day-to-day use with this Toyota, you'll need to keep the car locked into the driving mode system's eco setting, which moderates throttle response and engine power output while tweaking the climate control. When the engine does kick in, the fuel meter in the instrument binnacle seems to suggest that it sips fuel at an agreeably restrained rate, helped by what Toyota claims to be a world-beating thermal efficiency rating of over 40%. All of the technology on offer might make you worry about this CHR hybrid model's reliability, but the Prius-derived engineering in use here scores very highly in almost every customer satisfaction survey going, and all models are covered by a 5-year, 100,000-mile warranty. They're not quite a match for Kia's 7-year deal. This is a notable improvement on the limiting 3-year, 60,000-mile packages that you get from brands like Ford, Vauxhall and Volkswagen. Unlike earlier Toyota hybrid models, there's no extended warranty for the hybrid components. Early Priuses were covered for up to 8 years. However, after the 5-year warranty expires, you can renew it at extra cost for a further year or 10,000 miles, and do so every 12 months up to the 15th anniversary of the car's initial registration, provided a hybrid electric service is regularly carried out at a main dealer Toyota hybrid electric specialist. As standard, CHR buyers get 5 years of pan-European roadside breakdown assistance, a 3-year paint warranty and 12 years of anti-perforation cover. As for looking after your car, well, routine maintenance is needed every 10,000 miles or 12 months, depending on which comes around soonest. That may be a little frustrating if you're a higher mileage driver. Hybrid models are subject to extra service checks, but Toyota doesn't charge any more to do it. There's a dedicated My Toyota website that allows you to book a service online, and Toyota has a fixed price servicing plan, so you'll know in advance exactly how much any work will cost before you check into a dealer. You could also take advantage of the optional prepaid service plan that your dealer will offer at point of purchase, this enabling CHR owners to cover the cost of routine maintenance with monthly or one-off payments in advance. However you go about paying for maintenance on a CHR hybrid, it shouldn't cost you very much. After all, there's no starter motor or alternator to go wrong, no drive belts to break, a maintenance-free timing chain, no particulate filter to get clogged up with diesel fumes, and of course, thanks to the CVT Auto gearbox, no clutch either. The hybrid setup has a good record for minimising tyre wear, and its battery will last the life of the car. Plus, the regenerative braking setup helps extend the life of the brake pads. Over 60,000 miles of driving, the front pads should only need replacing once, while the rear pads and all the discs will probably last the full distance of ownership. What about predicted residual values? Well, industry experts reckon that after 3 years and 36,000 miles, the CHR 1.8 litre hybrid in XL trim will still be worth £15,784, which equates to 51.7% of its original value. For a CHR 2-litre hybrid in XL trim, the figures are £16,682, which equates to 51.9% of original value. Finally, we'll tell you about insurance. The 1.8-litre hybrid models are rated at Group 15E or 16E. For the 2-litre hybrid, it's Group 21E or 22E. In their original development of this car, Toyota apparently had someone in mind. Annoyingly, they even gave that person a name, Valentino, a trendy 20-something type and, of course, a dedicated follower of fashion. This CHR is certainly that, and if you are too, you'll love it. If, on the other hand, you're not, it might be tempting to take an instant dislike to the thing merely on the basis of its rather pretentious perspective on life. Don't do that. There's actually quite a lot to like here, particularly in the case of this improved model. The driving dynamics have been fine-tuned to a level that's unusual in a crossover. And though it hurts us a little to say it, the people in Polo Nex have done a rather fine job with the bizarre bodywork and the creative cabin. For goodness sake, what's the point in ignoring a perfectly good family hatchback and paying more for a crossover if it doesn't look, well, something like this? Before the original launch of this Toyota, in common with most of the market, we drifted into a conviction that cars of this kind, like Seat's Attica and Nissan's Qashqai, looked quite trendy. But then we saw a CHR. Yes, there are issues with it, but most of the practical caveats, the cramped rear cabin, the restricted boot space and the awkward rearward visibility, are inevitabilities forced on this Toyota by its dramatic design. Aside from that, the motoring press have moaned about the ponderous CVT auto gearbox and the awkward power delivery of the hybrid engine. That's fair enough, but those issues have been mitigated a little by the more sophisticated engineering surrounding this improved model's more powerful 2-litre hybrid engine option. Those who've to stick with the older 1.8-litre hybrid unit will more keenly experience these drawbacks, but will probably think them well worth putting up with for the superb efficiency figures possible with petrol-electric power. In summary, as you probably gathered, we like this CHR quite a lot and think the update changes made here were well judged. We're disappointed that it's become a little pricey, but if you can live with that, this car remains an interesting alternative to more conventional contenders in the compact crossover segment. Much has changed at Toyota. If you doubt that, just go and try one of these.